Some parasites don't just live inside bodies quietly. They slowly invade the brain and secretly manipulate behavior without the host realizing anything is wrong. In nature, several parasites evolved horrifying strategies that force animals to behave in ways that directly increase the parasite's survival. Instead of killing their host immediately, these parasites manipulate fear, movement, and decision-making to guide victims exactly where they need them. Victims suddenly behave strangely, approaching predators, climbing dangerous places, or wandering toward environments they would normally avoid completely. From insects to mammals, mind-controlling parasites appear across the entire animal kingdom, each using disturbing biological tricks. Scientists studying these organisms discovered that parasites can influence brain chemistry, changing fear responses and decision-making. Some infected animals even walk directly toward predators as if their survival instincts were completely erased. Even more disturbing, certain parasites infect humans and may subtly influence personality, risk-taking, and emotional reactions. Many infected hosts continue living normally, completely unaware that a microscopic organism may be influencing their behavior. These are the most terrifying parasites discovered by scientists that can secretly control the minds of their hosts. One of the most famous mind-controlling parasites is called Toxoplasma gondii, a microscopic organism that infects animals worldwide. This parasite has an incredibly complex life cycle that requires moving between several completely different species. However, the parasite's final and preferred host is the domestic cat and other members of the feline family. Before reaching cats, the parasite usually infects small animals like mice that live close to feline predators. Normally, mice instinctively fear cats and run away immediately to avoid becoming an easy meal. But once infected with Toxoplasma, something extremely strange begins happening inside the mouse brain. The parasite alters brain chemistry and slowly removes the mouse's natural fear of cats. Infected mice sometimes even become strangely attracted to the smell of cats. This disturbing attraction dramatically increases the chance that the mouse will be captured and eaten. Once the cat eats the infected mouse, the parasite finally reaches the perfect host to reproduce. Inside the cat's digestive system, the parasite begins reproducing rapidly, producing microscopic eggs that spread into the environment. These parasite eggs are released into the outside world where other animals can accidentally consume them. Once another animal eats the contaminated food or water, the parasite enters the bloodstream and travels toward the brain. Inside the brain, the parasite forms tiny cysts that remain hidden for long periods of time. These cysts slowly influence brain chemistry in ways that scientists are still trying to fully understand. The parasite appears to increase dopamine activity, which affects motivation, fear responses, and risk-taking behavior. As a result, infected mice may move more slowly and explore areas they would normally avoid. This reckless behavior dramatically increases the likelihood that the mouse will encounter a hunting cat. In experiments, infected mice even lose their instinctive fear when exposed to cat scent. Healthy mice run away immediately, but infected mice sometimes approach the danger instead. Scientists believe the parasite targets specific brain regions responsible for fear and survival instincts. By altering these areas, the parasite effectively rewires the host's behavior for its own benefit. The parasite doesn't directly control movement like a puppet, but subtly changes motivation and emotional reactions. This subtle manipulation makes the infected animal behave in ways that appear strangely reckless. Eventually, the infected mouse is likely captured by a cat, allowing the parasite to complete its life cycle. This terrifying strategy allows a microscopic parasite to manipulate predators and prey simultaneously. Even more disturbing, scientists discovered that humans can also become infected with this parasite. Studies estimate that a large portion of the global population may carry Toxoplasma gondii. Most infected people show no obvious symptoms, but researchers suspect subtle behavioral effects may occur. This means one of the world's most successful mind-controlling parasites might already live inside millions of people. Another terrifying mind-controlling parasite does not infect mammals at all. Instead, it targets insects living deep in tropical forests. This organism is a parasitic fungus known as Ophiocordyceps, sometimes called the zombie ant fungus. The infection begins when microscopic fungal spores land on the body of an unsuspecting ant. Once attached, the spores slowly grow and begin penetrating the ant's outer body shell. Inside the ant's body, the fungus spreads through tissues and begins influencing the insect's nervous system. At first, the infected ant behaves almost normally and continues working with the colony. But gradually the fungus begins changing the ant's movement patterns and decision-making. Eventually the infected ant abandons its colony and begins wandering away from the nest. Guided by the fungus, the ant climbs vegetation and searches for the perfect location. The parasite forces the ant to climb to a precise height above the forest floor. At this height, temperature and humidity create ideal conditions for the fungus to grow. Next comes the most disturbing part of the infection process. The fungus forces the ant to bite down tightly on the underside of a leaf. This behavior is called the death grip because the ant can no longer release its jaws. Once the ant is locked in place, the fungus begins consuming the host from the inside. After the ant dies, the parasite continues growing through the body. Soon a long fungal stalk begins emerging from the ant's head. At the tip of this stalk, the fungus produces a capsule filled with spores. When the spores are released, they fall onto the forest floor below. These spores infect new ants, starting the terrifying cycle all over again. Entire areas of rainforest can contain dozens of these infected zombie ants. Scientists sometimes call these areas graveyards of zombie ants. Each dead ant becomes a platform for the fungus to spread more spores. This strategy allows the parasite to spread efficiently through entire ant colonies. The fungus never infects humans, but its ability to control behavior is still disturbing. It demonstrates how parasites can manipulate host behavior with incredible biological precision. The ant believes it is still acting normally, even while the parasite guides its final actions. For the parasite, every step of the ant's final journey is carefully controlled. The infected ant unknowingly becomes a delivery system for the fungus. And this disturbing parasite proves that even tiny organisms can completely control another creature's fate. Another parasite with an incredibly disturbing mind control strategy is known as the lancet liverfluke. This tiny parasite has a complicated life cycle that requires moving between several completely different animals. The first host of the parasite is usually a small land snail living in grassy environments. Inside the snail, the parasite reproduces and produces hundreds of microscopic larvae. Eventually the snail releases the parasites in small slime balls onto the ground. These slime balls are then eaten by ants searching for food near the soil surface. Once inside the ant's body, the parasites travel through the insect's internal tissues. Most of the parasites settle inside the ant's abdomen and remain inactive. However, one parasite moves directly into the ant's brain and begins controlling its behavior. During the day, the infected ant behaves almost normally and continues working with the colony. But when the evening temperature begins to drop, the parasite activates its control. The infected ant suddenly climbs up tall blades of grass nearby. Once at the top of the grass blade, the ant clamps its jaws tightly onto the plant. This behavior places the ant directly in the path of grazing animals like cows and sheep. If the grass is eaten, the ant and the parasite inside it are swallowed by the grazing animal. Once inside the cow, the parasite finally reaches its ultimate destination. The parasites settle in the liver of the animal and begin reproducing again. Their eggs are eventually released into the environment through the animal's waste. Snails feeding on contaminated ground then consume the parasite eggs. This begins the entire disturbing life cycle all over again. The most disturbing part is how precisely the parasite controls the ant's behavior. The ant climbs the grass at night when grazing animals are most likely to feed. During the daytime heat, the parasite sometimes releases control so the ant can return to safety. This prevents the ant from dying too early from sunlight or heat exposure. Then the parasite repeats the process again the following evening. This cycle continues until the ant is finally eaten by a grazing animal. For the parasite, the ant is nothing more than a temporary vehicle. Its only purpose is to deliver the parasite safely into the next host. Once that mission is complete, the parasite continues its life inside a much larger animal. This disturbing strategy proves that parasites can control behavior with incredible biological precision. Another parasite with a terrifying mind control strategy is known as the hairworm, a creature that infects insects and manipulates their final behavior. Hairworms are extremely long parasites that can grow many times longer than the insect hosts they infect. The life cycle of the hairworm begins when its microscopic larvae enter small aquatic environments like ponds or puddles. These larvae must somehow reach a land insect, even though they begin life inside water. The larvae first infect small aquatic creatures which may later be eaten by insects like crickets or grasshoppers. When the insect consumes the infected prey, the parasite enters the insect's digestive system. Inside the insect's body, the hairworm begins growing slowly while absorbing nutrients from the host. Over time, the parasite becomes extremely long, sometimes filling most of the host's internal body space. Despite the enormous parasite inside, the insect continues living and moving almost normally. But when the parasite reaches maturity, it begins manipulating the insect's brain and behavior. The infected insect suddenly becomes strongly attracted to water, something it would normally avoid. This strange attraction forces the insect to approach dangerous water environments. Eventually, the parasite drives the insect to jump directly into the water. For a land insect, entering water is extremely dangerous and often fatal. But this suicidal behavior is exactly what the parasite needs to survive. Once the insect enters water, the hairworm begins emerging from the host's body. The parasite slowly wriggles out of the insect and into the water environment. After escaping the host, the worm continues its life freely in the water. Meanwhile, the insect host often dies shortly after the parasite leaves its body. For the parasite, the host was simply a temporary vehicle to reach water again. Once in water, the hairworm searches for a partner and begins reproducing. The worms release thousands of eggs that eventually hatch into new larvae. These larvae then wait for another opportunity to infect a new host. The cycle continues as insects unknowingly consume infected prey carrying the parasite. This disturbing manipulation shows how parasites can control behavior even in relatively complex insects. The insect believes it is simply moving normally, unaware that its behavior is being hijacked. In reality, every step toward the water is guided by the parasite's survival strategy. This biological manipulation is one of the most disturbing examples of mind control in nature. Even though the parasite is small, it can completely determine the fate of its host. And for the insect host, the final journey toward water is a deadly trap created by the parasite. Unlike previous parasites, the next organism is a virus that infects mammals and causes dramatic changes in behavior. This virus is known as rabies, and it is one of the most dangerous behavior-altering infections ever discovered. Rabies spreads through saliva, usually when an infected animal bites another animal or a human. Once inside the body, the virus begins traveling through the nervous system toward the brain. This journey can take days or even weeks depending on where the infection first entered the body. When the virus reaches the brain, it begins causing inflammation and severe neurological damage. At this stage, the infected host begins showing dramatic behavioral changes. Animals that were once calm may suddenly become aggressive and unpredictable. This aggression increases the likelihood that the infected host will bite others and spread the virus. The virus essentially turns the host into a carrier designed to infect as many others as possible. One of the most disturbing symptoms of rabies is hydrophobia, or fear of water. Even though the host desperately needs hydration, drinking water becomes extremely painful and difficult. This symptom prevents the host from swallowing properly, causing saliva to build up in the mouth. The buildup of saliva increases the chance that the virus will spread through bites. The virus also affects the host's emotional state, leading to confusion, anxiety, and extreme agitation. As the infection progresses, the host loses control over movement and coordination. Eventually, the disease leads to paralysis and, in most untreated cases, death. From the virus's perspective, this horrifying progression is an effective strategy for spreading itself. By altering behavior, the virus ensures that infected hosts come into contact with new victims. This makes rabies one of the clearest examples of a pathogen influencing behavior to increase transmission. Unlike parasites that control insects, rabies affects large mammals including humans. This makes the virus especially dangerous because it directly impacts human health and survival. Fortunately, rabies can be prevented if treatment is given quickly after exposure. Without treatment, however, rabies remains one of the deadliest infections known to science. This terrifying virus shows that mind-altering infections are not limited to insects or small animals. Even in humans, microscopic organisms can influence behavior in ways that increase their own survival. The line between infection and behavior control becomes surprisingly thin in cases like rabies. These organisms do not think or plan, yet their effects resemble deliberate control strategies, and for the host, the infection can completely change behavior, turning survival instincts into dangerous actions. This makes rabies one of the most terrifying real examples of behavior-altering infections in the natural world. From microscopic parasites to deadly viruses, nature has developed terrifying ways to control the minds of living creatures. These organisms do not think or plan, yet their effects can completely override natural instincts and survival behaviors. Insects climb toward death, animals lose fear, and infected hosts unknowingly become tools for the parasite's survival. Each of these examples shows how powerful biological systems can be, even at a microscopic level. But what makes this even more disturbing is how invisible these infections can be in everyday life. Some parasites may influence behavior subtly, making it difficult to even notice that anything has changed. This raises an unsettling question about how much control we really have over our own thoughts and decisions. While most people are not controlled by parasites, these examples show what is biologically possible in nature. Understanding these organisms helps scientists learn more about the brain, behavior, and the hidden forces that influence life. And as research continues, we may discover even more surprising examples of mind-altering organisms. If you found these real-life parasites disturbing, there are many more strange and terrifying facts hidden in nature. Nature is full of bizarre strategies that are often more unbelievable than anything imagined in science fiction. If you enjoy learning about these kinds of fascinating and disturbing facts, consider exploring more videos like this one. Make sure to subscribe and stay curious, because the world is full of things that most people never even realize exist. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying things are not the ones you can see, but the ones controlling from within.